Time now for the Sunday Talk. Tonight, the politics of shaming. I'm sure you've heard the story, but the backlash is still growing against a fad of flinging an obscene phrase at female broadcasters. It was going strong until it met a blaze of online shame.
The ACL, a victory, student. That's rude.
It was harassment that female reporters simply endured until last Sunday.
You're lucky there's not a vibrator in here, like in England, because it happened all the time. It's amazing, and I respect it.
After this exchange went viral, Sean Simoes, a hydro worker, was fired.
Everyone should feel safe and happy down here. This should be a place where... That's not cool!
The camera caught this truck's license plate and police fined the driver. Impunity revoked by an online eruption of shaming. And it isn't the first time. Last year, this racist comment from the owner of the LA Clippers traveled like wildfire.
You had to talk to me a lot if you wanted from broadcast that you're associating with black people. You have to.
NBA owners forced him to sell his team. And this week in Florida, a hearse was caught making a stop with a flagged, draped coffin in the back.
This guy stopped at Dunkin' Donuts.
The public exploded, and the driver's boss couldn't fire them fast enough.
That's absolutely terrible. It's not what we do. Absolutely total lack of respect.
As Sean Simoes now knows,
If your mom saw you
Oh, my mom would die laughing eventually.
online shaming is unpredictable, and you tempt it at your peril. I'm joined by our panelists. Tasha Carradine is a columnist with the National Post and iPolitics. She's in Montreal tonight. John Moore is a talk radio host in Toronto. And our guest panelist, Steph Guthrie, is a feminist advocate and freelance writer who's done a bit of shaming herself in the past. I'll come to you in a moment about that, Steph. And Tasha, welcome from Montreal. We'll
Thank
get
you.
to the broader issue in a sec, but I think everybody would kind of like to know where you stand. Did the hydro guy, as he's become known, John, did he deserve to lose his job over that?
I don't want to backstop him, but I would suggest no. And if you look at proportionality, which is supposed to be a part of our justice system, for example, you have a guy in Calgary who shouted the same thing, got a $400 fine. You have a guy who does it in Toronto, and as the National Post demonstrated this week, and so did the edit pack there, you know, hundreds of people have done this. Not that it's acceptable, not that it's ever to be encouraged. I'm glad it's stopping. But these days, it seems you fire somebody for anything because you can't take the heat, essentially.
Steph?
I think it's appropriate for the employer to take action, mainly because, you know, this guy thought it was appropriate to barge into a woman's workplace and make a sexually violent joke. It's appropriate for an employer to wonder how that sense of humor might manifest itself in the guy's own workplace, how his female colleagues and clients might feel about having to deal with him. So I think the important thing, though, is that the employer's action is motivated by creating an equitable and safe workplace and not good public relations. Because if it's all about good public relations, the decision might not necessarily be in the best interest of women or whoever the marginalized group is.
So pay more attention to the issue as opposed to that particular incident.
Exactly. Yeah.
What do you think, Tasha?
I don't necessarily think it's about equity so much as judgment. This guy, obviously, the hydro guy, had extremely poor judgment, knowing a camera was rolling on top of it, to start making these sexist slurs and engage in this back and forth with this reporter in such an obviously vulgar and crude manner, and obviously showing that, you know, he had no respect for women. That's part of it, but it's more that he actually decided this was a good thing and a funny thing to do. People have been fired for kicking dogs in elevators. They've been fired for tweeting that they won't get AIDS because they're white. People who make stupid judgment calls and say rude, racist, discriminatory things, their employers, yes, it's partly that because everyone knows their name. They're on the internet. The employer doesn't want to be associated with them anymore. And if someone's about to do that or does that, I don't blame them.
But didn't we all used to say maybe not terrible things, but inappropriate things? But now it seems to have blended crossed over into the workplace. Is that right, John?
Yeah, but I think it's two things. One of them is proportionality, and Tasha just mentioned a whole slew of things, and all of them led to firing, not to discipline, not to mediation, not to some sort of sit down and apology. Everything is about getting fired these days. Nobody's ever irked or miffed. Everybody's outraged. We're in a permanent state of outrage. And I think it's also worth mentioning, again, not to condone the guy's behavior, but you're drunk on a Sunday afternoon coming out of a sports game. She could have probably waded into that crowd with a microphone and spoken to anyone, and they would have said something stupid. And his judgment outside of a soccer game is not the same as whatever job it is he was doing at Hydro One.
Tasha?
No, but the point is, today cameras are rolling everywhere. He even particularly had one pointed at him. People also get caught by cell cams and cameras all over the place. The point is that if you're going to engage in behavior that is obviously an expression of poor judgment and it goes viral, your employer is in a very different situation than if you do this and nobody notices. And today everyone notices. It takes it to a different level. It's not even so much public relations, I think. It's that people will look at the company and say, how can you keep someone who would do such a stupid thing publicly in your employ? What are they doing in your employ? Do I really want this engineer engineering hydro projects if he has such bad judgment?
So is it good, Steph, that we're learning about this behavior?
Well, I think that the important thing is that we learn to actually examine the views and attitudes that are underlying our choices to say these kinds of things. What I worry is that people are going to take away from this, oh, okay, well, it's okay for me to think that, I just can't say it in a public place. And really what people should be reflecting on is like, maybe it's a problem if I think it's okay to go into a woman's workplace and say F her right in the P. You know, the attitude and the sort of dehumanization of the woman and treating her like she's just an object in the course of you making a hilarious joke to an audience. That attitude is what I think is most relevant to employers and needs to be tackled.
There is the truly objectionable. And then there is the trivial, and some of that just gets taken to such an extreme. So Tasha, I mean, can we never misbehave again because we live in such a public environment and everyone's got a cell phone?
Well, I think there's a difference between, you know, some mild misbehavior and using the kinds of the vulgar language, for example, or the kicking the dog, showing that you lose your temper over something like this and mistreat someone. I think that certain things hit a nerve, and I think this hit a nerve. I think some kinds of misbehavior probably wouldn't receive the same sanction. But yes, I mean, we are more restricted, definitely, I think, in our public behavior than we used to be.
But aren't we losing something there, John, that we can never misbehave without worrying about?
No, and in many ways, and you know, even I think of myself, you know, if I got drunk at a party and got on the bus and I was making somewhat of an ass of myself, I mean, not yelling obscenities or trying to humiliate somebody, but just being a bit of a drunken boor, somebody would probably say, I think that's John Moore, I've seen him on TV, I'm going to videotape him and put him on the web. Even worse than that, I will confess that when I have been out for coffee or lunch with people I don't know particularly well, I am extraordinarily guarded, because what does everyone do? They put their cell phone on the table, maybe it's recording. I mean, you know, to make light of it, frankly, if a basketball team owner cannot be frank in the privacy of his mistress's home, then who has any privacy?
You want to pick up on this?
Well, I mean, I wish that nobody felt comfortable making racist comments, whether they're in the privacy of their own home or in public.
But should there be limits on that? Like, you have found it appropriate in the past to point to people, to shame, as it's now called, people. Shouldn't there be a limit, though? Because some of this is trivial.
I think we have to treat each situation differently. I mean, each situation, the comments are different, the implication is different. What I did when I confronted a man who made a video game about punching a feminist in the face until she was raw and bloody, you know, that person should be treated very differently than somebody who, you know, who parks a hearse at a Dunkin' Donuts on the way to a funeral. Like, the impact of these behaviors is very different, and we should be focusing on the impact when we decide how to respond.
But everybody loses their job. The two guys who parked the hearse, who'd probably been doing that for 30 years, lost their job. I worry a bit. Well, it comes down to the proportionality, you know, and we don't have any proportion. Everything is an incredible outrage.
Well, and that's the, I mean, that's the employer's judgment call to decide whether to fire or not, right?
See, I don't think they have the judgment, because that funeral home had to fire those guys because the funeral home was going to lose business, and that's the mob mentality, and it turns on you like a swarm.
I think if PR is what you're concerned about, you can respond to that kind of thing. Maybe instead of firing, maybe you do a training session with these guys. There's all kinds of ways that an employer can respond to these sorts of things, depending on the situation.
Tasha, you're trying to get in?
Yeah, I was going to say, to go back to something earlier that Steph had said too, I think that the reason that the shame takes on the magnitude it does is because of the internet, it's because of social media, it's because everyone gets this information in a lightning flash, and so there's the creation of this large mob. But what upsets me about the shaming is that sometimes, yes, you could say that I agree with the result, but it doesn't seem to change our behavior. I find that what we're seeing is so many more of these incidents, but we're still seeing people continuously finding new, stupid, vulgar, racist things to do. So it's not the shame culture may affect individuals, but I don't know if it is going to what Steph is talking about and changing the root attitudes of the problem.
In Europe, apparently, they're talking about, in some countries, they're talking about developing legislation that would stop people from being shamed. I'm not sure.
That
Who
seems
knows?
very strange.
Yeah, who knows how that would work? And it's a bit like universities today, where you have trigger warnings and all these things where you're going to be offended by something that's been in the canon of literature for 100 years. Having worked in comedy, I am always afraid of people trying to tell me what is offensive.
Yeah, I'm really wary of legislative responses to this kind of thing, because the thing is, I don't want us to lose the right to say these kinds of things. What I want us to lose is the will to say these kinds of things. I'd like for us to develop a sense of humor that takes into account...
But does shaming make it better or make it worse?
I think it depends on how it's done. And I also think that framing it as shaming, that's sort of dismissive. And I think that it makes it seem as though the reaction is not fair or is not warranted.
Last quick point to you, Tasha.
I was going to say, the problem is, though, we also bring this all on ourselves. I mean, our culture has become hypersexualized. You've got, women also saying and doing very degrading things to themselves, and often to get attention. And who do we idolize? We idolize people like, Kim Kardashian, who started her career, such as it is, with a sex tape. I mean, the problem is so much bigger. If Steph wants to address the problem, and I agree it should be addressed, it's so much bigger than the shaming issue, because people seek out the attention that ironically gets them shamed because they think it's just cool to be sexy on the internet. That's a big problem.
Well, all of us are perfect and have never done anything that we wouldn't mind being judged for. We are out of time. Got to go. Thanks so much, Tasha. Tasha, and thanks to you.